Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Fake Nerds Watch for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2. I am Brandon T. McClure. With me, as always, is Sparkz Witty.
It is I. I am here.
And Ryan Eliopoulos.
Don't stop till you Spock enough. Come on.
I was wondering if you're going to remember.
I'll always remember.
You can't leave Sparkz hanging.
I almost
that was aggressive.
I needed to make sure I got it for it undocked.
He needed to use a little lubricant for that one. All right, we're here to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 8, Under the Cloak of War. This is directed by Jeffrey W. Bird, written by Davey Perez and Anitra Johnson. So, but that's just to get into this one. It's a heavier episode than the last week's episode. So, what do we think about this one?
Why don't you go ahead, Sparkz?
Okay. I thought that it was good to find, depending at what point in the episode I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. Smart.
Yeah.
Ryan, feel the same way?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about it, and there's something about the episode that doesn't sit with me, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So I'm glad we're having a discussion. I liked the big swing that they were going for. You know, I don't want I love the lovely light episodes, but also, you know, I can enjoy, you know, a nice think piece as we've had in these last 2 seasons. I just think it misses the mark some of the time. But like, I appreciate the big swing, but mostly I agree. It's a good episode.
Yeah. I'm not sure where I fall on this episode, I'll be honest. I think tonally it reminds me very much of the episode from last season, which is the one where Pike has to wrestle with the fact that if either he lets a kid die or he lets the entire species fall out of the sky. And I think that episode is probably a little stronger. Mm-hmm. Truthfully, probably a lot stronger. I think that there are things that this episode does that don't quite hit as well as they want it to. I've got some mixed feelings about this one, I'll be honest. I think this one's going to be interesting because I'm working through a lot of them.
Yeah.
So why don't I start with a positive? Because I know for a fact that the very first ship that we see in this episode, I love it. I love ships. You guys know me. Everybody knows me. If you're watching this show, you know me. I love starships. And Star Trek Strange New Worlds has been, their budget is not as big as some would hope. So they have to reuse ships, but we got a brand new, beautiful starship, and I love it. I love it when we do that. I love it. I'm so happy about it.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about it, because like it is a nice looking ship, but I like starship ships plenty, but like I'm not as reverent as you are, so I do want to know why it's so cool.
I didn't remember there was a new ship.
Yeah.
So there is a thing that Star Trek Strange New Worlds has adopted from Star Trek the original series, actually, which is that there's a lot of Constitution class starships. Constitution class starships, that's what the Enterprise is. And the last season, when the second Gorn episode, which is the one they're on the planet, they're in a different type of starship. They're in a different class of starship, but it's still a Constitution class. I think the only difference is that it's smaller, and I really didn't care for that. And this season, we've seen more of the Farragut class, which is Kirk's ship, and we've seen more of the Archer class, which is what we saw in the first episode of the first season. And those are cool ships. I like those ships. I like the Farragut class specifically. Constitution class is my baby. I love that ship so much. But I really like the big kind of arrowhead swing that they were like, yeah, we know that starships have you know what a starship looks like. It's got a saucer section, and it's got a hull section, which is their engineering section, and then the nacelles, and then kind of variations on all of the on that. Either the saucer is down below, or the thing is like to the side, or whatever. But this one was really cool because it was just like this thin kind of arrowhead looking ship that kind of came to a point at the end, but that's not where the deflector dish was. The deflector dish came down on the bottom of it, and it's had the one nacelle. I was just like, that's cool. I'm happy that we just played with the ship design for a minute there.
Whose ship was that?
That was General Doc Ra's
Gotcha,
Ambassador Doc Ross. That's where they picked him up. He was on that ship, and so they picked him up.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was a Federation starship, but they picked him up from it. So I just appreciated it because I love starships.
But the ship minute. We're Brandon T. McClure.
Yeah, there's ship minute for you. It doesn't happen too frequently on this show because they reuse ships a lot, but I appreciate it when you don't.
All right, that was the shipyard section of the podcast.
But Ambassador Raw comes. It's basically the plot of this episode is that Ambassador Raw comes on board the Enterprise, and he's a Klingon. Right off the bat, I do really like how Pike makes the mention that that some of his crew fought in the Klingon War, and some of them didn't. So there's going to be a different way that people are going to approach these Klingons, approach a Klingon, especially one as revered. That's not the word. Infamous.
Infamous.
As him. I do like immediately when he beams on board, we see the transporter chief kind of like tense up, like, oh, yeah. I'm not comfortable here. I like the kind of sense of tension that the episode creates right off the bat.
The thing that I like the most about this episode is until the end is the idea that Starfleet, it's about everyone's equal and we're trying to move forward in progress. And like, what do you do when a mass murderer arrives on your ship and he's like, no, I'm cool now. No, but I'm cool now. It's like, it's Operation Paperclip. Like, yo, you're bringing Nazis into like, no, but we're cool now. Don't worry about it. Like, that's tough to deal with. And I think the strength of this episode is how M'Benga handles it. Even again, some of his story, I think, is some of the weaker stuff, but I think also some of the strongest stuff, just because how he deals with the war and the aspects of how what is a federation that is out for exploration like do in the face of war, and how that does change people. And I liked again until the end of the episode, I was like, some people can change, and I know like. I'm not saying that like warmongers in a real life deserve a second chance like that, but it's just fiction, Emma Frost is one of my favorite characters. She was a coke addict supervillain in the 80s, right? People can change in fiction, right? So like I like the trajectory of the episode, but then I just think the episode kind of fumbled it at the end. But I like the through line of the story. I think it's a really cool Star Trek idea.
Sparkz, did you have a thought there?
Not on what Ryan was saying. I agree with him, but not in specific response to it. They did the thing again, didn't they, where it was Pike's log at the beginning, but it's M'Benga's at the end.
Yeah. Well, we get Pike's log, and then we get M'Benga's log again, because we get the thing where he's like, oh, I'm fixing up the thing, and it's always keep breaking after the thing, and he's the bookend. He ends the episode with his log, but he doesn't start the episode with his log.
Why do we start with two logs?
I don't know why they feel like they had to start with Pike's.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I think that shows a hesitation to have confidence in the very story they were telling.
Yeah.
That we have to start from Pike's perspective right away, just to be like, I know there's bad feelings, but I'm doing it anyway. And
there could have been a more natural way of that progressing. Like he shows up on the ship and then it's like naturally explain that story instead of
I don't know,
like front loading it.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about for this episode. I think I'll start with I thought the flashbacks were really cool at first.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really neat. And then when the episode was over, I thought about them more and I was like, did we need those? Actually, did we need those? Did we need all of them? Did we need all of them? Or did we just need like one for Chapel and one for M'Benga and like call it a day? Because I think we spend too much time on that when really it's all one point just being told in different sections, but it's all the same point.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting point. I didn't ever ask that question. Did we need all of them? And now that you ask it, I'm not sure where I fall on that.
Because to be honest, like the important one is the revelation that it's M'Benga killing the Klingons.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you could just have that.
There's
like you don't need to do all, and you could have Chapel have one about when he met M'Benga and like a little bit of like whispers about that, like, but just condense it all into like a flashback with Chapel about the drugs and like things are bad and like he's killing, but like they're talking about it in the present. They're saying you don't need to kind of show me.
You don't need to show
him threatening killing children.
Yeah.
for me to believe you.
Yeah.
I believe you went through war. They're good actors. I don't need to see all these flashback scenes. I think they're ultimately like kind of sucking up time that probably was more important in the present.
Yeah. The one flashback I do like is Mbega talking to that soldier. Because that is the thing that I do like about him talking about, I joined the Federation not to be a soldier. And it is like a firm, like radical stance of like, listen, in the face of adversity, even if you're a pacifist, you have to become someone with a fist. Like you have to fight bad people sometimes. There's nothing to do against it. That makes you a good person, even if you're fighting, and that's like something you have to deal with. And I really like that.
That is maybe the most important point that you need to have outside of like the revelation for Mbenga is I didn't join to be a soldier, and now I'm a soldier.
Show us the horrors of war,
and
you don't need to do the whole episode.
And I think that's valuable, but like we could have probably done 3 or 4, like 2 for Chapel and 2 for Mbenga.
It felt like an Arrow episode,
appropriately spaced throughout the episode. And that probably would have been enough.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed the amount we had or the scene time that they gave it because, like, it just didn't do more.
I think it starts to cannibalize towards the end because, like, it should just focus on the future. Just focus on these characters.
To be honest, I felt like they kind of went into a place where they were like, we can be dark on this show. Mm-hmm. We can be now. We can be dark. And I'm like, that's cool. I don't know. Did it totally have purpose all the time? Sometimes. But all the time?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's a really good question. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say just like real quick, it got extremely violent too. Like we were seeing like John Wick murders happening, and I'm like, whoa, like I mean, cool, I guess.
And I think it could have those things. Like we could have done a lot of that like a lot faster, just Mbenga facing his trauma, rather than having to like really sit in a lot of those scenes for that amount of time.
Yeah, Joseph Wick.
There's a couple of things that you guys brought up that kind of lead me to some points, but I want to focus on what Ryan said about the scene between Mbenga and the other soldier, the other Starfleet officer, and what I do appreciate about this episode is that it bears a similarity to an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine during the Dominion War, which is a big war which is the big war of the 24th century, Klingon War being the big war of the 23rd century. Federation always finds themselves in a war that they don't want. And I really appreciate them talking about this idea that that Starfleet specifically are not warriors. They're not trained for war. They've got strong weapons, but they're meant for defense more than anything else. They're not it's really weird to say to think of it this way, but they are a military of exploration. Mm-hmm. Like their primary duty forever is to explore. And so you look at, and so what I like about that is that it parallels what Uhura is kind of doing in this episode. I know Uhura doesn't get a lot to do in this episode. She's very much a side character, but there is an interesting contrast with Uhura's character in this episode where she's looking at Ambassador Rovs like, oh my God, this reformed Klingon, because she came up through the ranks, through the academy after the war, whereas a lot of her shipmates, a lot of her friends didn't. And so she has a very different perspective of what this war is than that soldier who went into the Federation, went into Starfleet Academy for the exact same reason that Uhura did, but is flung into a war that nobody wanted except for the Klingons.
Basically drafted, yeah.
Yeah, and I do really like that kind of look at Starfleet, that this is something that they're just never prepared for, because this is not what their purpose is.
Although there is Solid Snake Hemmel with the scar, and he's part of like special ops Star Trek. So like there's apparently a whole like special ops team going around assassinating people, which is like, that's cool, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you need that CIA, you need that kind of stuff.
Very, very reminiscent of he's an Andorian. You can tell by the blue skin and the antennas. And I really appreciate that that's the third variant Andorian we've seen, kind of creating this idea that Strange New Worlds has been perpetuating, of this idea that not all alien species look exactly the same. He very much has the long kind of shadow cheeks of the original series Andorians. In the last episode, we saw just normal blue face people as Andorians, and of course, Hemmer is an Andorian variant with the big prosthetic kind of eyebrows. Just nice little detail I appreciate.
Yeah,
just want to shout it out.
Shout out.
There's another thing though that I want to talk about that maybe how do I want to put this? Because this is kind of a silly continuity thing rather than a kind of a heavy kind of episode thing. What we flash back to is Discovery. We flash back to essentially Discovery season 1. And that's cool. And I'm kind of interested. I'm kind of into that because I like the previously on Star Trek Discovery, we fought Klingons and Klingons were like blah blah blah. The whole Remain Klingon that Ortegas talks about, that's from Star Trek Discovery. That was Takuma's battle cry. And he, but I'm happy to see kind of that Discovery rep, but I do wish that there was. I wish that they were wearing Discovery era uniforms and not Strange New Worlds era uniforms. This is the same thing I rubbed up against in the episode where we talked about on Rigel 7, when they went to Rigel 7 and the yeoman was wearing just a Strange New Worlds uniform. Just that kind of like continuity, that kind of like little extra bit of continuity that I wish they would do to kind of be like, okay, well, if we're back to Discovery, let's use the Discovery comm badges and the Discovery tactical outfits, and let's make it look like we're back in Discovery. But it just kind of looks like we're in Strange New Worlds still.
You mean in the flashbacks with the R2 characters, they're not wearing the appropriate uniforms?
Yes.
Okay. No, that should be an attention to detail thing. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wish they went that extra mile. It's probably just as simple as they don't have the props anymore. But I wish they maybe just put in the little extra effort.
It's one of those things that like doesn't attract, but like it would be a bonus, you know? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Also in this flashback, welcome back to the franchise, Clint Howard. Ron Howard's brother is in the first flashback, and he has been in Star Trek since the original series. He was in the first season of the original series as a 9-year-old child. I think that's funny.
Man, Howard's, all of them, their work, even their dad, he's like 100 doing work still. Love it.
Is he still working?
I don't know if he's passed, but that dude shows up in movies. At least a lot of older movies for sure.
I wanted to shout out Clint Howard because when I saw him, I was like, well, damn, they did it. They got Clint Howard back.
When I see Clint Howard, all I think of is the right-hand man of the mayor and the Grinch.
Sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I have a way more obscure one where he's in a 90s horror movie called The Ice Cream Man, where he's a murderous ice cream man. And that's how I know him.
That's funny. Yeah. I know him as a 9-year-old from Star Trek, the original series. You kind of look later, not now, but like you should look up the picture of Clint Howard in Star Trek, the original series. It's really funny.
Looks the same.
Is he an alien or is he just a regular kid?
He's an alien. He's a baby as an alien, and it's just really funny.
Love it.
Anyway, let's move. I do agree now that I'm kind of thinking about it, Sparkz, that how many flashbacks were there? Do we like what?
If I took a guess, because I didn't count, if I took a guess, I'd honestly technically say 7, maybe 8, because of the double up on when we think it's the ambassador flashing back, but it's a manga, and then we see it again, and then we see more of it, and it's a manga. Technically it's a double up, but it still happens both times.
It's a different flashback, technically, almost.
Yeah, I would agree with you, kind of, as I'm thinking about it. Like, you know, maybe we needed the first one. I'm happy with the first one, the last one, and the soldier one. But outside of that, like, what's really exciting about a flashback where we see Chapel massaging a heart? Like, what do we need? What do we need there, right? What's that flashback does need?
Well, see, and like it feels like there's. I don't think they were going for this. I want to be clear. I don't think it was even kind of the thing they wanted to do. But it does feel like if that was to have a purpose, the purpose would be that like the Federation kind of fails these people too. Because like Ryan made an excellent point, and I was already thinking about it before he said it, but like we can just like make whatever food we want up here on the Enterprise, but
like cup and juice already hot,
but we can't get a heart out here on the field.
They're using like old school tools,
and Clint Howard references it. His character references that he keeps asking for these supplies that they're not getting, and that he says is like it's less than like they're just saying like, oh, we can't. They're not even responding.
It's like the Outer Rim.
Like they're not even answering the calls. And it must be frustrating. It's unfortunate, I think, that the episode doesn't go into it, but it must be frustrating for Mbenga and Chapel to know that like the resources and the technology exist to save everybody who dies at that war zone.
Yeah.
They just don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
And like to know that they're there, they just don't have them on them.
Remember when the ambassador gets burned, they go right to the med bay and they just like, hey, here's your skin back. We're just going to give you your skin back. Like, that's not on that battlefield for sure.
And that would be the purpose, right? Of what you're specifically referencing, like Chapel massaging the heart, like it's highlighting where the Federation pushes people beyond what they can safely, like if they are truly an explorer, like they may get caught up in a war, but they can choose how they engage in that war. And like in this case, they're engaging in a way where they're basically just throwing these people into a shredder to get killed.
They're not prepared.
They're not giving them what they need to even kind of survive. And I feel like that could have been a conversation, but it just doesn't want to be. It only wants to be about the Klingons being bad at the time.
Yeah. So that actually brings up an interesting point that I didn't think about, because that replicator that's on the Enterprise isn't supposed to be there. In the 23rd century, they didn't have replicator technology. They had synthesizers, but it's not the same thing. I've recently found out. But what we see with the cup materializing and the liquid in it, that's not supposed to be there. So I think that's kind of interesting that they draw attention accidentally to a continuity error by not making that flashback more meaningful.
Yeah.
It's Jack Quaid. He did it.
Jack Quaid did it, yeah.
Yeah.
He brought a replicator technology. The replicator thing has been bugging me for a while, so I'm kind of glad that I was finally being able to bring it up in a continuity way and not like a story way, and not in the like a way.
Yeah. They just got it now.
Yeah, it clearly it doesn't work like it's supposed to, because they can't get it right.
I mean, Brandon, they had it during the original series. It was just broken
the whole time.
So shout out to the Made It So group real quickly, which is my Facebook Star Trek group, who will see this in many, many months. But I had asked the question. So guys, question. In the original series, so in the original series, in the galley of the original series, in the mess hall of the original series, which is basically the bar set in this show, they have these like colorful food cubes and things. That is their food, and that was supposed to be like Gene Roddenberry, like food of the future. And that's like proteins and things like mixed into a goop and then created. That's what a synthesizer is. And then like Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country has like a galley where it's just like they have cooks like making food for everyone and things like that. And then Star Trek: Next Generation has like replicators. You can make whatever you want. Replicators technology uses something different. It uses doesn't matter. I don't want to get into the thick of this. But so I had to ask them. Made It So group of like, guys, am I misremembering, or did like the original series have replicators? And they told me the difference between a synthesizer and a replicator. Just thought that was funny. So thanks, guys.
There you go. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
I have to tell you in the most loving, non-Big Bang Theory way, that as you were describing that, I was picturing like Justin Long and his friends in Galaxy Quest on the computers talking with each other while they have the Galaxy Quest episodes playing.
Look, you guys wanted to do this show with me. A huge Star Trek nerd. You're gonna get Star Trek nerd.
I'm just saying, that's what I pictured. Hey, those guys saved the day, so like, you know.
That's true.
Sure.
And that kid's name is Brandon.
That's true.
There you go. Look at that. It's all full circle here.
It's gotta take out the trash.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me, guys. I gotta take out the trash. Anyway, that is a good movie. I should rewatch that again. Anyway, you mentioned something before we started recording about Ortegas in this episode. Sparkz.
Yes. Sorry, I thought we were still gonna. I still wanted to follow up on the technology thing.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Oh, no. I just all I want to do is drive home just a little bit more of the point of like, I think what bums me out, I think ultimately about this episode, and we'll get into the specifics of why, is that it feels like they wanted to deal with the notion of like culpability on both sides, but the way that they went about it is a culpability of like personal trauma. There's no hint or idea at all directly in this episode that the Federation at all was mishandling the war.
Right.
And I feel like that's disappointing. Granted, I know nothing about this war. But just in the context of this episode, like, it feels like there should be a more rewarding story out of when we usually get stories like this, war stories like this, and dealing with the trauma of war afterwards. It's usually soldiers. This is 2 healers and a pilot who are our main characters we see dealing with it.
Right.
It's an opportunity for a perspective that can focus more on like the deaths and like that there's no need for this to have happened in a grander sense than just because of the guy across the other side of the trench.
Then I love everything you just said, but then they're like, no, we have to turn Omega back into John Wick.
This is what I mean.
And I'm just like I feel like you're like mixing up against the thing you're trying to say. Like you're rubbing up against it. And like we were doing so well for a second.
When they were talking about the first episode of this season, they were talking about how they regretted in the first season that they never gave M'Benga an action sequence because Babs. Oh well, damn it! I still can't pronounce it. I've been practicing and it just won't come out of my mouth right. He's a martial artist. Yeah. He's a really good fighter.
We've talked about that before, yeah.
And so like they were like, okay, so the first episode we gave him an action sequence, and I was like, and I think after watching this one, I'm like, I think you overcompensated. I think you should have stuck with the one and not done it again. Or this should have been the one.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that like this one doesn't. So when we first saw it, I assumed that they got to taking the drug because it was the only way for them to live. Like that was the reason it happened, was a situation like that. And I don't mind M'Benga taking it to exact revenge. But the implication was that he already had it and that it had been used. Am I wrong?
No, because the guy that's
what he's asking.
The evil hammer guy was like, yo, you got any more of that stuff?
Right. And that's the part.
M'Benga made it.
Right. Yeah. That's the part that bothered me, is that M'Benga already had made it. And that it had been used for those purposes, regardless of like how he feels about that or not. I thought it would be better if it had been something that he and Chapel had only taken in duress, or like to save their lives, or to save the lives of others,
survive,
or again, like I don't mind him taking it for the revenge, but I almost wish like that was the first time he'd ever engaged with it. That was literally when he made it, was for revenge.
Yeah,
that would at least be more like
Tony Stark in a cave of scraps.
It'd be more rewarding for like why the character is doing this, why you make that. Right, like this is Doctor Who did this right in the Davies area all the time. Like how like when he crosses the line from being doctor to soldier, and like obviously Moffat picked up that baton, but like Davies started it, and it's that same notion of like you have this perspective. I wish we were getting so much more of it about him having been a healer and feeling like he was ruined by war into being a soldier, and like you can have that conversation, but it doesn't feel like the episode wants to actually be about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There's a sense that I get in regards to the first episode when I see M'Benga, and this is kind of another thing about this episode, that this is the episode where that drug should have been the payoff, and it wasn't, and I'm really confused by that because, like Sparkz said, I'm kind of seeing a plot line where it's like, okay, well, he's making the drug. He's like the flashbacks are. In the background, he's making the drug, and the drug isn't something. The thing that really rubbed me the wrong way is that it was Starfleet sanctioned. Starfleet made the drug. He made the drug for Starfleet on Starfleet's orders, and Starfleet decided to discontinue it. And I feel like that should have been more of like M'Benga was making it because he saw these soldiers dying on the battlefield.
Right, and then you could have Starfleet come in and take advantage of it, and like that's part of why, again, like it bothers me in this episode, is because like Starfleet holds a part in why these events are happening to the people who are in Starfleet. Like it's not just the Klingons enacting this violence upon them. Like they are in a situation that is clearly losing, and they are just being thrown up against a wall without any of the resources they need to defend themselves, let alone heal the people who are getting messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's no notion of like resentment or disappointment in the way Starfleet handled the war. Like, that's just not a conversation in this episode. And again, like, I kind of go back to like, then why are we focusing on this flashback so much if we're not going to interrogate how Starfleet's also failing them? Because like, we're just told about all the terrible things that the Klingons are doing, but we're actively watching Starfleet not be able to protect these people.
I could be wrong, because like this might be a thing where like they'll never go into this into further episodes, but like this might be a situation where like they want to show the horrors of war and how bad it could be, but in their eyes, Starfleet is still like the good guys, so we won't see. We will never see what we want to see. You know what I mean? They'll never show us what we want to see. Is what I'm thinking. Like, they will never paint Starfleet in such a bad light. We're like, oh, are we going to question how Starfleet operates? Like, no, they're the stars of the show.
I think what you're rubbing up against is what is the criticism of the Star Trek Discovery encountered in its first season. And it's very clear that Star Trek Discovery was trying to do this, like tried to be set during the Klingon War. It was interrogating the faults of Starfleet as well as this war and how the Klingons are bad. And it was in fact doing what you were saying it was doing, not particularly well in a lot of cases, but it was attempting it. And the fandom, well, the fan reaction to Star Trek Discovery is very clear. It's well documented. And Star Trek Discovery pivoted hard. And I think in a sense, all of Star Trek did. Star Trek Picard, very much the same thing. Star Trek Picard in its first season was looking at Starfleet as the bad guys, pretty much. Like, Starfleet was messed up. They did something wrong. Let's interrogate what that is, what that means for the galaxy. Again, not particularly a great way to go about it, but they were still doing it. And again, that season, the backlash to that season is very well documented. And I think what happened was all of the Star Trek shows, because of that, pivoted and decided against looking at Starfleet in any critical way.
Sure. That's a shame if that's true.
Yeah.
Can you clarify something for me? When Starfleet approaches a planet, whatever, civilization, new one, and they say, join Starfleet, if they say no, what happens?
If normally it doesn't happen that way. The planet asks for admission into the Federation.
Okay. So first contact is not them saying, come join Federation.
Right. First contact is just, hey, how's it going? We're here. Just letting you know we can be trade partners and whatnot. You want us to hang out?
You've advanced far enough.
Okay, I'm only basing it off the first episode of this show.
Yeah,
sure.
That's what Pike does, so I assume that's what they do.
First contact does not mean you're brought into the Federation. Normally, a planet has to progress to a point where they ask for Federation citizenship, and then they will be brought in through a process.
Okay. But like, if they're not part of Federation doesn't share their resources with them.
And if they have a deal, if they have like a trade, it's like us with like, it's like, think of like the United States as the Federation and then Mexico as another planet. We can like trade with them.
Sure. Okay.
But there has to be like that communication of like, you know, okay, well, we have a contract where we trade with you.
We can move on. My point wouldn't make sense.
Well, I'm curious what the point was.
Well, I would have said that there's a parallel between like, assuming that Federation doesn't share its resources when people don't join them.
I don't think it's like Star Wars Republic.
That they would withhold their resources in any sign of duress. So it's basically like, that's fine. Like, we're not going to do anything to you, but we're also not going to like give you anything.
Yeah.
Right. So like you're a singular entity on your own kind of thing.
My
only point was going to be about how that's a parallel of what they're doing to Mbenga and Chapel.
Right.
You know, we're giving you something, but it's not much. And that again, like, there being a criticism of Starfleet's way of, and they are colonizing space, can can have ramifications in indirect ways just by virtue of what they choose not to do as much as what they choose to do. And that would be cool if it was something that they even kind of wanted to play with in this context. Again, like there's other things we should talk about that are actually in the episode. That this is just more a point of like, I don't understand why you have this landscape and opportunity for these characters to give this perspective. And all we boil it down to is like, man, all people who didn't trust that Klingon sure were right. Shouldn't have trusted that Klingon.
Yeah,
that's what the episode boils down to, and it's kind of lame.
Yeah.
Now I do want to kind of put a button on this by saying one of the things I think that the modern Trek shows have done well, even into the pivot, as I've explained it, is that they have moved the Federation away from a very Americanized focus to a more of a worldwide focus, because it's no secret the Federation is based on the United States of America. It's very clear.
What?
Right? And so like like as time has progressed, there's always been like, oh, maybe the United States, oh, maybe we put the magnifying glass back on the United States. And what I appreciate with Prodigy, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, Picard, Discovery, on all forms, to some degree, they have broadened the Federation out of America and been very clear, like, no, it's not America. It's what would the world actually look like if it came together and formed a unified Earth.
So I really like the intent of that, and I'm glad that they want to do that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. However, I do think it gets sticky when you're doing a prequel show to the original that is deeply American centralized. And so that means that's what the Federation is. Like, regardless of if you try and say they had that more diverse, open perspective, like that's something you develop in later Trek. That's something that like Starfleet should change. But we know Star Trek. And Starfleet wasn't that. Starfleet was very American. Like that was, it was centralized. It was this idea. And that can allow for mistakes. And they're supposed to learn from them. So this is where it's like, yeah, you should kind of be judging like the colonizer aspect. Like, does the Klingon War even happen if you're not in that mentality?
Well, the Klingon War is interesting because like the first episode of the Star Trek Discovery like introduces this Klingon named T'Kuvma, and T'Kuvma has this whole thing where he's like the Federation. They claim they come in peace, but what they do is they come to your space and they make you be more like them. They make you be more like the Federation. They want you to be more like the Federation. And T'Kuvma's perspective is that the Federation are colonizers, as you were saying. Whereas the Federation's perspective is we're peacekeepers, we're explorers, we're just exploring, we're just keeping the peace, and that's where the war happens, because T'Kuvma it's on the edge of Klingon space, and T'Kuvma coerces the Federation into a war. It is his fault that the war happened, and so again that goes back to the whole thing. Like Discovery was trying to do that, and then.
But at that same time, what you're saying is like Discovery wanted to give a non-Americanized sense of this expansion and this engagement in wider space. But when the original series encounters Klingons, how is that?
Well, the original series encountered the Klingons like we encountered the Russians. The Klingons in the original series are the Russians, and during the Cold War.
Yeah, so pretty Americanized.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
What's so interesting is like you look at like just ship names now. Ship names are like in Discovery just alone. The Sheng Zhao is a ship in Discovery. It's the first ship we see. That would never have happened in the original series. The original series, if you look at Star Trek ships, they're all named after American figures, or American ships. Enterprise is one of the most famous ships ever.
Sure, and I want to clarify that, like, I'm not disparaging the original series necessarily. I think for its time, it's incredibly progressive. I would never take that away from it. It's a very progressive show, but it is locked to its time, and that does mean it comes from a very Americanized perspective because, frankly, there wasn't enough information on the table for it to be anything else, nor was there ever going to be a studio giving them enough leeway to do anything else.
Right.
So, like, it has to be that. But it does kind of mean that the prequel shows also have to be that. You kind of can't globalize the perspective of Federation if that isn't what it was. Like,
That's a really good point.
I do think that that's just kind of like rubbing up against it. And honestly, like it kind of even flies in the face of some of the stuff we watched happen earlier this season. The stuff with Una, that's very American centralized in the way that they're thinking about it. And we talked about that. Like it's very based in that. It does not want to broaden its perspective. And that's fine. That's where Starfleet is right now. It won't be there forever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As much as I love this conversation, we should probably get back to the episode, though.
Yeah, okay. So let's specifically talk about it in terms of this episode. We have other things we'll touch on, but I do want to just dive into talking about the ending because I don't like that it boils down to Klingon bad, and I especially don't like it boiling down to they ultimately seem to have told everybody else now that the ambassador was still a Klingon at heart, I guess, and like prone to violent rage, and all he had to all that had to happen was him to be called a war criminal, and he became violent and attacked a Starfleet member, and thus had to be put down. That feels like that should have some big ramifications. And at the end of the episode, it doesn't feel like we get any indication of how that will be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So Ambassador Docra is a Federation ambassador. He's not a Klingon ambassador. He's always working for the Federation.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, when I said that, I meant like that's what he is. He is a Klingon who is an ambassador for. No,
I know. I'm saying something else.
Cool.
And this is where it's locked. This is where the prequel-itis kind of sits in, because the Federation can't have a good perspective on Klingons in the original by the time the original series rolls around.
Sure.
So the ending of this episode is so, I guess, interesting. I guess, yeah, I'll say interesting. It is. It's kind of interesting to dig into, of like this idea that that as far as the Federation is concerned, Docra did not change. As what they had thought, he did not change. And that perpetuates the idea going into the original series that the Klingons are all blood-hungry, bloodthirsty savages.
Right.
But as an episode, it creates a really bad taste in the audience mouth of, well, because I wrote this many times, like, what is the point here? Is the point that Strange New Worlds is telling me that people cannot change? Because I've been in Docra's situation where I want someone to believe something so passionately that I'm kind of passion to someone like me looks like rage. So like if I'm trying to, and so I get into this kind of spiral of my, all the neurons firing, and I'm just sitting there going like, oh, please listen to me. Please listen to me. Why won't you listen to me? And someone else takes that as rage, and then they're in a rage, and then they're in a fight. And it's like, I've seen that situation happen. It's happened to me. So I know, so I kind of fall on Docra's side of M'Benga I get that M'Benga has PTSD, which absolutely is relevant and something that should be addressed. And Docra was in the wrong to even approach him. But that's not a reason why he should be put down.
I feel like the episode I think this episode frustrates me because it's such a good concept at its core.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what it is I think M'Benga gave him the chance, honestly, when he first asked him which one of them fought the hardest, to be truthful and tell him, I ran. Which would be different.
Yeah.
Right? I ran and I thought about what I'd done, and I don't think Docra is like making everything up necessarily. I think he wants to have a different perspective. But I also think he feels like it's forced on him. He is a deserter. Like he can't go home. So like it is something where it's like, yeah, he made the best of a situation that he ended up in because he was a coward.
Yeah.
Like as a dangerous and from everything we get contextually in the episode, I believe everything they said that like he was brutal and like he like brutalized people in a way that was absolutely beyond and unnecessary. So like he was monstrous. But he was also a coward. When faced with it, he was a coward. Mm-hmm. And he can have had thoughts and like really ruminate on things, but there is a degree of like, it's not necessarily an act, but it is a shield. It is a job and position to get behind so that he can live a cushy Federation life. The Federation needs me. It can give him whatever he needs and whatever he wants, while he doesn't have to suffer the wrath of any Klingons who are mad at him for deserting. And like, that's juicy. That's messy.
Yeah.
And then what Mbenga did is also messy.
Yeah.
And I think for me, again, it does kind of come back to the fear of like Starfleet culpability, because just what you said, Brandon, like when we get to the original series, they have this belief about Klingons that like there is no changing them. You could say this is the thing that makes them believe that. You could say this is the thing that makes people who are on this ship, who are on the ship later then, believe that. And like, this is the reason. This is a big reason, because this was the guy they were using to begin peace negotiations with Klingons. And it turns out, guess what? They're all murderous bastards. That's the logic. That's the way that's the takeaway that they're going to have. What bothers me is that the episode gives no implication of like the greater ramifications of what it means that this is the lie that Mbenga is telling.
We know it's not in the next episode because the next one's a musical.
Following this episode up with the musical one was an interesting choice.
It's a fun sandwich.
Yeah.
But that's you have this opportunity to use this, right? If you're going to do it, use it as the thing. And it's weird that they didn't use it as the thing to say like, this is why Starfleet continues to distrust Klingons. They gave it a chance. Again, very Americanized in that way. Yeah, we gave it one shot. It was bad. We won't do it again. Right. That would at least like make all of this line up of like why we wanted to drive to this point at the end. But as it is, I'm kind of like, I don't know, how worthwhile was this as a story point?
Yeah, because like I think of Ortega's and like her whole thing and like the Remain Klingon, and I think all of her stuff's like really good and strong. And I'm like, so does this episode just reinforce her hatred of Klingons and everything that she believes is like right, instead of trying to like teach her something? And I'm like, that's like that's not a character. That's not good for any of the characters on this ship, I don't think.
And I'll attack the thing directly. What with the framing of it, that they want to leave some idea of like who really went for who and who really was about to kill who.
It's so sloppy.
I don't believe Mbenga, if I'm being honest. I think Mbenga, I think that Darkra got heated, but I don't think he was going to kill him, but Mbenga took it as the opportunity to do so. And I get it. I think there's an amount of like, there's a lot of reasons that I can kind of get on board with, like, and I think he was being goaded by Darkra too. I think Darkra was pushing him.
Yeah.
In a way he probably shouldn't have, especially once he realized that he's the one who killed all those other men trying to get to him. So like, I think he kind of puts himself in the position to ask for it. But I do think Mbenga did it like in an act of trauma and violence. And I think it's so much more poignant if the point that you're making with this whole episode is that Mbenga lies. If that is the case, lies about the circumstances of why this happened. Even if that isn't exactly how it happened, he's definitely hiding their history and how that fueled that engagement. To paint a narrative just so that now incriminates all Klingons for all of Starfleet for a while. That's heavy. That really means something.
It does.
And I don't think they go for that on the head as hard as they should if this is what we're doing in this
or
episode.
Realize what they were doing.
PTSD is such an interesting, I gotta stop saying that, a heavy topic to deal with. If not done right, it can seem a little sloppy. And 3 characters in this episode, and more, honestly, that we see, but 3 of our main characters deal with PTSD.
Right.
And I 100% don't believe Mbenga's story. And I think that in a PTSD-induced rage, he killed Darkra. But Darkra was goading him. And the thing that I think would have been interesting is if Ra had seen that this was that what Mbenga was dealing with was PTSD. And I understand that's probably not something that Klingons have ever had to deal with. What am I trying to get at here? It's just, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't know what they want us to take away from it when all is said and done.
Because I don't feel better about Omega after this episode.
No, I don't feel, and I don't feel better about Chapel because also Chapel. 100%
oh yeah, she's complicit, and yeah.
She says he hears war criminal and he is activated. And I'm like, I don't think that's what happened.
No,
I don't think that's what happened. And I really think that should be an important moment in the show and in Star Trek that we acknowledge that Mbenga and Chapel hung an entire race out to dry on this moment.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're like the worst people in the world for that. They are traumatized. But I do feel like they didn't approach this with a lot of nuance for these characters or what they're going for. And that really just is like, it feels like a very big whiff of an opportunity.
Sure.
Like they wanted to do something very pointed and very political inside of Star Trek, and I feel like it doesn't all come together to make anything really strong.
And if I knew the next episode were a direct follow-up, or like we're gonna continue to have this, not even a part 1, part 2 thing, just like we're gonna continue to talk about the things we just talked about, I'd feel a little bit better about it. But I know, just like it's happened a lot this season, something that happened this episode that I hope they address, like, yeah, it's okay. That's something they really did like good in the first, like, besides the Una thing. But like, I don't know. This episode, like the more I think about it, I'm just kind of bummed out about it.
I think that there's potential to revisit the events of this episode in the next season, and I hope they take the opportunity to do so. This is kind of the issue that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is running into this season in regards to it being only 10 episodes. And I understand, you get a larger budget. If you go on a streaming service, you get a larger budget, you do 10 episodes and you're done. But if you had 20 episodes, hell, even 15 episodes, you can revisit this episode this season and you could do something with this and really like dive into this. But you're not going to, because your real estate in this episode, in this season, is so short. And I'm kind of running into an issue with this 10 episode. The reason why I bring this up is because I'm running into an issue with this 10 episode season in the last season, in the sense that the last season also had a few things that were set up too. That didn't happen in this season. That didn't pay off in the season. So are we going to get it in the next season, or are we just never going to get it? And again, this is something, if you had more episodes, you wouldn't need to run into, but we are running into this. And I feel like episodic Star Trek does better with longer seasons.
Yeah, I definitely don't think every single TV show needs the 20 to 23 episode old school model. Not every show needs that or deserves that. But something like Star Trek, where it is, again, a serialized, where like you can't have, it is basically like almost a Monster of the Week in Space type show, but you can't have serialized forms throughout that. Star Trek is a show that deserves that. And like, I love how good the show looks. Like, it is really nice to have a like incredibly beautiful, expensive Star Trek show. But like, if I can get double the episodes, I would take a budget cut, because I am someone, I'm not cut up, but I watch Doctor Who and that show looks like shit, and I don't care that it looks like shit, you know? So if I can get a show that looks a little bit less good for double the episodes, I would eat it up. I would totally be happy with that. More like on set stuff, more like old costumey stuff. I love that stuff. I don't mind that.
I think my bigger problem with this is that I think even if we had more episodes, I would still think you needed to answer like this concept of, what is this about and what is this for?
Oh yeah.
In this episode, regardless of if we're going to visit, and literally I would have to know there's a part 2.
Yeah.
That's coming up next for me to be okay. Otherwise you needed to tell me in this episode, why is this the way we went with this?
Yeah.
What is the implications of this? And I think you're right, Brandon. I think there's a good chance that next season they could pick up the string and be like, well, this is how we feel about Klingons ever since.
After the Gorn stuff.
Right. Yeah. But like, there's no part of me that's going to feel like that was fully baked in this episode, because it's not given to me in this episode, and it feels like it should have been. It should have been clear by the end of the episode what the implications of the ending between Mbenga and Darkra were, and they're not.
Yeah,
I would love to there's like, I'm sure every show has like an after show where like the creators talk and stuff, but I'd be really curious for this specific episode to hear like what the writers and director were thinking about this episode. I really want to hear what your perspective is on what the finale of this episode of like what do they think is like the net positive? Like, cause like, why would you have Mbega like kill this man? And like, are we just never going to bring it up again?
It's going to sound a lot like people talking about the Arrow episode about guns.
The gun.
So I would recommend you watch the Ready Room episode on this. So the Ready Room is the Star Trek After Show. It's Will Wheaton hosts a Star Trek After Show, and every time an episode drops, there's a new one. So there is one for every episode of Star Trek. I would recommend you watch this one. I'm not sure if you'll come away with it, because I certainly didn't come away with it with knowing anything more, but it is interesting to hear at least what they thought they were doing.
Okay.
We can pivot to Ortegas.
Yeah, so Ortegas is shafted this season. One of the things that I'm kind of running into with Ortegas this season is that they clearly didn't know what they want to do with her. However, in this episode, I think this is the most interesting thing they do with her, and yet it's not even a focal point of the episode. It's 2 scenes. And if you want to give her a subplot in any episode, I think it should have been in this one.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I said that I felt like this should have been an Ortegas episode because I kind of wish we were getting everything through the perspective of Ortegas. And like the whole episode, we spend the time thinking she's the hothead that's going to go off. But she's the one who's with Mbenga when he's the one that pops off.
Not Chapel.
And like, I would really change a lot of how this episode is structured if I did that. But like, if I were to redesign this episode, I would have played Mbenga as trying to really fooling people, playing it straight and cool, and getting hints that Chapel's worried about him because she knows that he's not well. And you can still have like Pike kind of like, what's up? But like Ortegas thinking he's like even going to him and being like, how do you handle it? And him like honestly kind of feeding bullshit of how you deal with it because he's not dealing with it. Yeah. And but that's like the perspective she has. And so but you spend this time thinking she's the one that's gonna like really tear off on Darkra. And then it's Mbenga that ends up doing it. And Ortega's having to kind of like rethink where she is in relation to that. It just would have been a better, like, I think, internalizing a lot about a character we don't get to spend a lot of time doing it with, but also like putting her on outside perspective of what's going on with Mbenga, I think would have allowed them to, at least with the things they decide to do in this episode, I think play a little better with it, because they would have been able to more extra outside external perspective look at PTSD rather than trying and not quite tackling it through the episode itself.
You bring up an interesting point that I want to kind of go back to, which is, you reminded me of an interesting point that I want to go back to real quickly, which is that Pike is given orders to have people who are directly affected by the war, and Dakra specifically, have dinner with him. And Pike should have disobeyed those orders 1000%.
Yeah, okay, so like this is my other thing with the episode, is that like at best it makes Pike seem overly optimistic, and at worst it makes him seem absolutely ignorant in like a way Pike never has been before. And I say that about what you just said, Brandon. I say that about like when Darkra grabs Mbenga by the arm to say, let's do some combat later. And Pike's just like, that sounds like a good idea. That's cool. Yeah. I will not have anybody go into that room and also be there just in case. I'm just going to let them do this. That's
security
fine.
Officer Law.
I'm not going to have security officer Law
make sure nobody dies.
Just to make sure nobody gets a little heated and out of control. This should be fine. Like, what the heck, Pike?
I bring it up specifically because I think this episode doesn't too much, but I do think there's an interesting discussion to be had about Captain Pike. Because Pike's not a wartime captain. He mentioned it many times that he didn't see any action during the Klingon War. He was off in deep space.
Right.
He is a captain who has never had to deal with this kind of conflict, this kind of thing. And it goes back to what we see in the final episode of season 1, Equality and Mercy. The reason why he's so different from the reason why he's so different from Kirk is because Kirk is a wartime captain. He is a captain who knows what should be done during war, and he gets the Romulans' respect for it. Pike is a captain who doesn't, and wants to do his best to make peace with our enemies, and loses the Romulans' respect for it, and which is why that the future ends up being shitty. And so, and I think that episode of Quality Mercy, which is my favorite episode of Star Trek at this moment, is of Star Trek Strange New Worlds at this moment, is a much better encapsulation of what this episode did, because this episode accidentally makes Pike seem too ignorant. Because there's multiple times where I'm watching this episode where I'm like, even Pike, who has no idea how to handle himself in a wartime situation, should know better than this.
Well, and like the thing is, I can buy Pike trying to go for this. Right? The orders come down. Pike approaches Mbenga and Chapel, and frankly Ortegas and whoever else he needed to, before they pick him up, and has a conversation about why this is being asked of them. And they, in their respect and dutifulness to him, bolster down their PTSD and say, yeah, that's okay. But he does do this in the episode, says, I'm not going to make you do something. You know, you got to say this is okay. And if it's okay, like, that'd be great. It's a big help. I think it could be the difference in making these peace things work. But like, and he is an optimistic person. So like, I can buy that, but like, he left the choice up to them. I just think that he made the choice up to them a little late because he's already on the goddamn ship. And that's the part that really gets me, is that he wouldn't have brought it up. Like, just frame it as him bringing it up top of the episode before he gets there. Can we do this?
Oh man, then you could open the episode with the Mbenga scene where he's fixing the bio bed.
It would have been.
Hey, why did they make a big deal at the end that the bio bed freaks out? Because like it zooms in and it sputters, and are we supposed to know? Are we supposed to care?
Well, it's because you can fix something, but it's always going to break again. It's kind of
I'm just making sure.
It's what I said it was.
I'm just making sure.
No, but it's sloppy metaphor.
Yeah.
It's kind of a as Sparkz said, it's a sloppy metaphor for PTSD of like, you can mend it, you can kind of put a Band-Aid on it, but that Band-Aid's going to fall off, and it's never going to go away completely.
I'm just making sure that wasn't like a tease to the next episode or something in the computer. I'm making sure it was actually that.
It was a weird and clunky way to try to end the episode, especially like putting the focus on the bed malfunctioning, like making us think like Mbenga's violently dangerous around any corner now. I'm like, this is a really weird way to do this. Just in general, like that again, like that ending and like the note of it and all that, like it just doesn't work. It doesn't leave the right taste in my mouth when we come out of it. But yeah, going back to the Pike thing, like you just slightly reframe when he asks them, are they okay with it? Because he does. He gives them, he fully respects them. He gives them the power of choice of how much they want to be involved in this. And they all say yes. And they say later that they're like, yeah, we're doing it because we freaking love you.
Yeah.
Like, we love Pike. We want to do this for him. And like, because he wants to believe that peace is possible. And like, that's all fine and good. But it's the stuff that comes later that really gets me about like, no, yeah, combat's okay. This is going to be fine. This is
because murder cover up.
Even before that, he even says to Mbenga's like, hey, if you need to go check on Ortegas, you should.
Yeah. That's the thing he does to make him get up and get out of the room. And then Darkrug grabs him by the arm, and I'm like, boy,
let's fight later.
It's a bad choice.
The thing about Pike is that he wants to be everyone's friend. And I think that he has this moment. I think what really kind of damns him in this episode, for me personally, is the end when he approaches Mbenga and he says, hey, if you want to tell me anything different than the official story, I'll go to bat for you. I don't think there'll be an inquiry. You've got me on your side. And I get it. I'm happy that he did that. But the fact that he just kind of like, yeah, all right, I believe you. I trust you. Bye. And that's where we leave that. No hint that Pike could probably not believe him, or maybe there's something more that he wants to do, but he's willing to protect his friend no matter what. Like, I I don't know. Just there's something about, again, going back to Equality of Mercy, the season 1 finale. I just think that does what this episode is trying to do much better. And I don't. I just think that how this episode handles what Pike is doing in this episode is also very sloppy.
They're therapists, right? They exist.
Not in the 23rd century. Well, there are therapists, but not on the ships. Not in the 23rd century.
Okay,
There should be.
I'm trying to remember because I'm like, what did Mbenga say that La'an needed to do as her doctor? He said like, you need to talk to someone, right?
Oh, she says, yeah, I talked to you. Isn't that
right? And he's like, the implication feels like therapist.
Yeah.
Like that's what you need. It's weird.
The doctor is the therapist.
Putting it in the logic of what's going on, though, it's weird that even under these circumstances and the I'm gonna believe you thing, Pike wouldn't be like, okay, but like I really think, as your captain, I need to tell you, like, you gotta go talk to somebody. Like,
yeah.
He just kind of it truly, really what it comes down to, I think, ultimately for me, is that it truly feels like the ship and Starfleet as a whole does not care that Mbenga murdered this person.
No.
Like, when it comes down to it at the end of the episode, nobody really cares that he did this.
Yeah.
And
Una is the smartest person in this episode because she walks up to Pike and says, you need to get this dude off the ship now.
Right. Yeah. Sure. But like, you get to the end and like everybody we see after that is just kind of like, yeah, dang, wow. Turned out to be just the worst piece of shit, I guess. Crazy that you had to go through that. So sorry, my guy. Here's your crown, king. Like it's just so odd. It's so cavalier. It's so uncaring about this action occurring. This what feels like should be a major altercation. We haven't watched this kind of thing happen on Strange New Worlds.
That's the thing. Like, I would say up until this point, like even its serious moments like this, I think this episode goes further than it has gone before, and I don't have a problem with that. But like, again, like once we get to the end of this episode, I'm like, I don't even know what you're trying to say, and you're making your characters look actively worse than before. And like, we have to address this in some capacity. Again, it's not this season because like Brandon, it's not an episode 10 at all, right? Like even any of that's no. I'm guessing. Okay, so like maybe they address it again, but like murder happening on the Enterprise of this capacity, and there's like almost like a cover up of it, feels like something that should be a little more important than just like, don't worry about it. Like it feels really, it feels like substantial.
Feel like it has more weight than just kind of the hand wave that it feels like the end of the episode.
It's like prestige TV. What they're trying to do in like week to week Star Trek, and I'm like, I just don't know if you're capable of doing that.
And I do want to highlight that I think even in the sloppiness of this execution, I do think there are good things. Like I do like that Mbenga has the bit where he says like, "I didn't start the fight, Chris, but I'm glad he's dead."
I thought he was going to say, but I ended it.
Yeah. I honestly I'm glad that's not what it was. Because I thought that too.
That's the.
But then he said, but I'm glad he's dead. I'm like, that's poignant. That means something.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like the episode wants to put the weight behind what that means. But it is a good line. It is a good beat. And like him calling Chris out for being privileged just for not being in war and not having lived that life. He's like, we agree about a lot of things, but you haven't lived my life. And like that can carry so much weight. It's just like, the episode doesn't want to engage with all the context of what that means around Mbenga.
We have been, we have been mostly critical, but like I do enjoy this episode still because like again, up until the end, like I really like the trajectory of they were going with, and I really like the ideas they were exploring. But it's like it feels like they were juggling 8 balls, and when they got to the end, they're like, oh shit, and they just dropped all the balls.
The reveal when Mbenga says it was not Kif who fought the harbor. And I was like, oh shit, he killed them. And he's like, I am the butcher of Jagal. I was like, this is hot stuff. This is too hot to handle. I dropped the pot stuff. Like it's very, very good and it's very weighted. And I wish more of the material around it wanted to feel like it was meeting that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. I'm going to go through some lines that I liked.
One other very briefly, but I do want to highlight one character does make a lot of good choices in this episode, and his name is Spock. Spock makes excellent choices, deciding to like, I sense something is wrong, and it's like he just has to keep talking about how he's achieved peace, and he's like, I can change that.
Oh yeah.
And goes over and changes the conversation, and I'm like, how magical, how wonderful.
Yeah. So I really like the line that Chapel says, "Why is it so hard to explain to people who weren't there?" I think that's an incredible line to just kind of exemplify what the episode is trying to say, which is basically that it's very, you can't explain PTSD, you can only experience it. Because that goes to another line where Una says, "Everyone is on their own journey." Because she's having a conversation with Pike after she hands him the pad to be like, "Get this dude off the ship." And they had this conversation where it's like, we have to, where Pike is like, well, we have to believe that people can change. And Una's like, you can't force everyone to change the same way. Everyone is on their own journey. And there's a lot of people on the ship who are just not ready to forgive Ra or the Klingons. And you need to respect that. And I really like that. I think that's really poignant.
Yeah.
And then Pike has another line later to Mbenga, I think he's saying to it, when he's talking about, well, where's the line between someone who gets the knife and someone who gets redemption? Like, he says, who pays and who gets redemption is the line. And I think that's a really interesting line also. Just kind of coming around this idea, kind of circling around this idea of like, is change possible for someone like Ra? Should we give someone like Ra a second chance? Or is this a person, or is this not a person who's worthy of redemption? And who makes that decision? Where is that line? And who is that person to make it?
Right. And I mean, like, that's very much that's really even like another whole tier beyond the things we were talking about that they weren't even like wanting to engage with, of like, saying like, who has the right to judge when someone gets punished or killed or that kind of thing. And I think it's all the more kind of muddy in how they land that line, just because of contextually, this is no different than if just like a other villain of any other Star Trek episode had attacked Mbenga and Mbenga defended himself. Technically, right, from Chris's perspective, should Mbenga and Chapel's story be true, this is no different than that. They have a history, but it doesn't change the fact that he technically should have just defended himself. And any other time, that would never be a conversation about like, well, who has the right to judge?
Right.
And so like, it's almost, because we know the greater context, it's not. But because Pike doesn't, it's like, it's kind of shitty for him to put that on Mbenga in this moment of like, essentially saying like, pretty much, I don't believe that you did this out of self-defense, which I don't believe either, but that I don't believe that, and thus you have judged him on your own merits for why to kill him. And I'm like, any other guy did this on the ship, like, you would not, like, he attacked your crew, that'd be it, he'd be done.
Yeah.
Like, this has happened tons of times. Like, I don't know, like, what, just because there is some amount of PTSD, we get to lay this on the feet of being a greater sense of like how you judge whether one, like, at this point, Mbenga has already put up with enough for Chris. Like, even if we didn't have the greater context that we have, and we only had Chris's perspective of, and then I called him a war criminal, and he attacked me, and I defended myself, and he's dead now. You kind of just let the man be at. Do you think he's happy? Like, do you think this is how he wanted his day to go? Do you think he wanted to encounter this person again?
Yeah.
This person's on the ship because of you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't come at him with like all these philosophical, like, what do you think about judging people for, I don't know. And this is again, like, them just not executing on what they want to do with the episode well. But like, in the context of what we know Chris knows about the situation, it does feel kind of shitty he comes at Mbenga that way. Technically, it's just weird. It's not a good way to approach a person you know has gone through as much as he has.
Yeah, I agree. Can I ask you a question, Sparkz?
Always.
What did you think of seeing your first sonic shower?
Man, those look awful.
Boring.
Just awful. Those look so
You don't
miserable.
even see the sound waves.
Yeah, a little bit.
Not enough for me.
Sure. Yeah, he just looks like he's kind of. It doesn't help that he's like blurring in and out of memory.
That's
so,
also.
like, it's not
I
clear.
imagine it like remember you guys. Brandon, you love the Incredible Hulk, 2008's Incredible Hulk. You
I
know
do.
those sonic sound wave machines that the Hulk has to. That's what I'm imagining happening. Your body's like ribbing, and getting rippled.
I get the logic of it, where like you're in that state, and like a shower is just gonna help you kind of like wash some of that off yourself, and like that works on a lot of people. Like you go, you take a shower, you're like. I cleaned myself of it, and I looked at what the sonic shower is doing, and I'm like, "Oh, is this helping? Is this making it better?"
I like water.
Or it's just like air reverberating at you, making it a little worse. Oh man,
that's what's so interesting about the sonic showers is because we've seen them. I think this is our second time seeing them. Oh no! By the way, I just got confirmation from my Made It So group that in Star Trek Lower Decks. They are communal sonic showers, not communal regular showers.
Man, they can't get a break anywhere.
Damn. That would be awful.
So I was looking at this. This is the first time because like
together.
Because the first time like I saw a sonic shower, if I remember the scene correctly, I think it's in Voyager, where B'Elanna is in the sonic shower, and it like turns on, and then the grime that's on her like comes off of her body, and that and like that I was like, okay, cool. But this one I'm like, the dude's sweating. Is that doing anything for the sweat?
I understand the logic of the sonic shower. I think it's terrible.
I assume
I would never want to live in that future.
He seemed pretty sweaty. I thought they were going to do some digital, like, oh, the sweat's going away. Like we're vibrating the sweat off. But like they didn't, it just looked like nothing was happening to him. And I'm like, this is boring. I don't like sonic showers.
Now there are baths. There are baths with water. So
the whole context of that scene in particular, where we get so many flashes of what he experienced, it's another reason why I'm like, I just don't think we need the real state of those other flashback scenes as much. I think we could have done more in the present to really flesh out these characters and what the actual conversation of this episode is supposed to be about.
Agreed.
I do want to mention that I appreciate that this is it's an Mbenga episode, but there is kind of a Chapel and Mbenga episode where it's not centered around Chapel and Spock. I just think that's nice.
Yeah.
I was happy about that.
Yeah.
I agree. I just think it's weird that we continue to just like not really engage with the fact that they're a couple after they have become a couple. Like we keep kind of doing it, but not really doing it.
I'm really excited for you guys to see the next episode.
I mean, I assumed it's a big part of the musical episode. I assumed.
Romance is in the air.
That's all I'll say about that. Yeah, okay. I think all my notes are. Yeah. All right. That's it.
I think we had a lovely conversation. I think we are critical of this because when you try to do more with an episode, you have more to falter on, and I think unfortunately they just really faltered on it. I really still like a lot of the episode. It's just they really fumble that last act. I really like that the Klingon guy. I think he's like a great actor. I really like his shtick, like him, like, oh, I'm pretending to be a good guy. Like I like all that stuff. I just think it's just a very messy ending.
I have one last line. I want to one last line to go back to, which is because Sparkz, you mentioned the reveal that Mbenga is the Butcher of Jagal. I like the line, using the blood on my hands to make yourself a saint. I just think that's a good line.
Yeah, I think it's very poignant. I think there's a lot of justification when like you look at it in that context, and he tells the story like, I killed all these Klingons and that's why I'm trusted, and like, no, you didn't. You ran. Yeah. You ran to the Federation because they're the only choice you had. And I think that's valid. It's just like, what a clunky episode for handling it. Speaking of the flashbacks real quick, there's the one where Mbenga makes the call to shut down the transporter system or whatever he does that kills one guy but saves the others.
Oh, yeah.
See, I forgot about it too because like I don't know what it means in the rest of the episode. This is my point. Like some of that flashback stuff, I'm like, yeah, it's a tough choice. I feel that, like, how does that connect to the rest of the story we're telling? He never even talks about it. Like, neither does, like, I don't know.
Completely forgot about that entirely. Can you remind me? Because I completely forgot.
So what it is like they're trying to pull people back because they know that he's having like all the civilians murdered. And they need to open up a big transport pad. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, Brandon. So that they can recall the people back.
Yeah.
But the way that they're having to reset the system in order to do it is going to kill a guy for some reason. It's going to kill the one guy who's over there.
Yeah.
So he's going to die, but the rest of them are going to be able to
kill one to save many.
Yes.
So you're kind of half right. So what happened is in the beginning, in the first flashback, we meet a guy who's too far gone. There's no dermal regenerator. There's no organ regenerator on this planet. So he'll die. He's just gonna die. But they know that the starships are coming, and they'll have all the equipment they need. So they put his pattern into the transporter buffer and save it there, like Mbenga did with his daughter in the first season.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so his pattern is there. But when the Klingons attack in the final flashback, it takes out all the transporters. So they have to reset the transporters, which has to reset the buffer in order to clear the buffer so that you can bring in more people. Now, I like it. And so you have to clear the buffer, and it kills this guy essentially. I like the moment, actually. I do. I think it's a pretty poignant moment. But as Sparkz said, it really has no bearing on the episode outside of, yeah, war sucks. Well, we get that. You've told us that the entire episode.
Right, that's my problem. Yeah. Like, I think there's just too many scenes of that flashback stuff, and like that's definitely a tough choice that Mbenga made. And like, if you want to make a direct one-to-one about like making a choice like that and feeling like this guy is the guy who made him have to make that choice, then like, okay, but like draw that line a little more clearly and maybe not filter in as much other stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a strong choice. It's just a strong choice not supported by anything else in the episode.
Yeah.
All right, anything else you guys want to bring up?
No, I appreciate the attempt to do something like this, but like, man, you needed, like, I don't know, get another writer on this one, maybe.
There's only 2 writers.
I get 2 more writers.
I feel like when you set out to make an episode like this, especially, you kind of have to start off with some kind of thesis statement of like, this is a conversational episode with a heavy topic. What are we trying to say? And like, that should be cemented. And then if anything in the episode isn't serving that idea, it shouldn't be there. And I don't think they have that. I don't think they have a thing that they're saying like, this is what the episode is driving for. Like, everything we're doing here is driving to this particular point. Yeah. I don't mind when shows do, these kinds of episodes where they want to get really topical about something.
Yeah.
Even if they feel like all of a sudden the show kind of got really hyper focused on something that's not focused on the rest of the time. And this happens all the time in other shows. And I don't mind that, but I do need to feel like they at least had some kind of reason they felt like they wanted to do this. And like, there was an intent, whether it was an intent for the characters or the larger story or for the audience of why they wanted to do this and go for this heavy topic. And I just I can't tell you what it is, what it's supposed to be.
Like, obviously this isn't the entire thing, but Brendan, you telling us that actor wanted to do more action makes me think like they were just, his arc was he becomes more of an action man, and they really weren't thinking about the consequences of it. Yeah, because like, he is a healer who's done so much combat. I'm like, I get the point you're trying to do, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the point. Just real quickly, I think the point that they want to get across is that war changes people. Mm-hmm. And like, I get that. You've made that point. And I think you're coming back to that point too often.
And beating us over the head with it.
And if I'm being honest, like, you got to have more to say than that. Yeah. Frankly, like, even people who haven't been in war get war changes people. We all have encountered somebody like who's gone through it one way or another. Whether they've gone through it through a loved one that we know them and that they had a loved one who went through it, or we have a loved one, whatever. We know war changes people. We know war changes nations. Like, it's not a very thoughtful thing to be going for. And I think that there needed to be more on the table than that.
Star Trek Picard dealt with the fact that the Dominion War really changed the Federation. I thought that was pretty okay. All right.
There you go.
I think we suggested in our conversation a lot of like clear ways where there was potential to have pivoted the focus of this episode. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's just like the focus was off. And I think if the episode was refocused around what it was supposed to be on, there's ways you retool a lot of what's here, just alter some things around and put the focus where it's supposed to be. And by the end of the episode, tell us what it's supposed to be about. Like, it doesn't have to be a direct, like, looking at the camera like it was about this, but it does need to give some kind of idea of, and that's why we wanted to tell you this story. Like, this is how it serves these characters. This is how it serves this narrative. And I think if they just done that refocusing, there's a solid episode in here because there's some really great ideas. Again, I stress, like, that reveal about Mbenga is really strong. The messiness, honestly, about this at this point in time in Starfleet and Klingons' history with each other, that there's this one guy who they're holding up. They're like, he is the evidence that we can have peaceful negotiations. And it's like, yeah, but he's only doing it because you're the thing keeping him alive. Like, that's very, very heavy. And to have those different perspectives on why he's like that and what that means, like, that's a lot of really juicy stuff. You just had to refocus on it.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Shall we get out of here?
Yeah. Warp speed.
All right, guys. That was episode 8. Under the Cloak of War. We'll be back next time for Subspace Rhapsody. Insane. Just the fact that they followed it. Crazy.
We'll be back next week to ask James Kirk, what are you doing on this ship?
No, it's not that one. No, I'm kidding. It's that one. Yeah, so all right. So that'll do it, guys. Of course, if you're watching this, well, that means the strikes are over and it's all happy good times. And but there's hopefully all happy good times. But there's all sorts of other shows on this channel. But there's plenty more Fake Nerds Watch that you can check out that you haven't had a chance to yet because of the strikes, such as Secret Invasion, probably an Ahsoka, if I had to imagine.
I mean, these things are coming out in order of when we record them. So Ahsoka's on the way shortly.
Yeah, so there you go.
It won't all drop at once, so shortly.
So there's plenty of other things you can check out, but make sure to check out our website to find links to all the shows and the shows that were impacted by the strike, so that you can catch up if you're interested. We hope you are. And yeah, so check out also all sorts of things there. I hope you enjoyed all of our Basement Arcade and Fake Nerd Book Club content that we did in this time. What do you think? Like 18 episodes of Fake Nerd Book Club till the strikes are over?
I don't know. How much do you think we do between now and 2025?
Yeah. All right, guys. 2025, I hope it's a good year. All right, that'll do it. Of course, you can check out our Patreon and TeePublic if you'd like to support us financially, which is all linked below, as well as our website at fakenerdpodcast.com. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Fake Nerd Podcast. You can also check out, you can also email us if you'd like at fakenerdguys@gmail.com. I'm at BC McClure on Instagram and Twitter. I also write for CPR.com, AtomicEtham.com, and KaidramaMedia.com. Sparkz, where can people find you?
You can find me. I don't know. I don't have anything witty. At Sparkz Witty on Instagram and Twitter. SPARKZ Witty.
Ryan?
You can find me being a bohemian, enjoying next week's Rhapsody and DJ Tony Snark everywhere. Everything all at once.
Tasty. I like that.
There you go. You did it. All right, guys. Until next time we see us, live long and prosper.